Okay, this is how banks create money, and hopefully it will be another short video. So, how banks create money? When they write checks, more money is out there. The Federal Reserve requires, for safety, they require that various accounts have a certain reserve amount held. Now, in this class, on this level, we assume that there's like one reserve requirement, like 10%. And that means that they have to hold, out of all deposits, they have to hold 10% of that deposit. In reality, take your smallest possible font and the number of reserve. The Federal Reserve produces a list that takes up 2 pages. It's actually a page front and back, so 2 pages of tiny, tiny print listing all the reserve requirements for every possible kind of account. And of course, that makes calculations a lot more difficult, but you can learn the basics of it if we just assume away the complications of multiple reserve requirements and we just say, what if the reserve requirement is 10%? Or what if it's 25%? Or what if it's 1%? So before we get into how I calculated that, let's look at this. New money is deposited in Bank A. And we include that in the sum because new money shows up usually from the Federal Reserve. They put money out there, they make money, and so and I will show you how in a later video or in class, okay? But they make money, they create it. Think of it this way, they are at the top of the checking account chain. They write a check, and if you and I want to cash that check, they say, they get into their little computer and they say, okay, we'll clear our check. And then you'll end up getting cash if you want it for a check they wrote that they get to clear. Wouldn't that be nice if you were at the top of the chain, you know, and you could write a check and the banks had to come to you to get money to pay for the check that you wrote, and you just kept an electronic record of what you owed the banks, so you just got in your computer and you said, oh, here, I'll put more money in the bank's account. I will teach you more about this, but basically, one of the roles of the Fed is that they are the banker's bank. The banks keep their extra money at the Fed, and the Fed has an account for them and types in how much the bank is owed by the Fed. So when the Fed writes a check, let's say I work for the Fed and they pay me my salary and I go to the bank and I cash my check from the Fed, and my local bank goes to the Fed and says, this person cashed this, please add money to my accounts at the Fed, the bank's accounts at the Fed. And the Fed says, sure. And they type in numbers. They make money out of the air. But anyway, let's say that somehow there's been a process, which I'm going to talk about, in which there's new money and somebody goes to the bank and deposits it. If they're required to keep 10% of that deposit, then they can make a loan, and I actually worded this wrong. I've got Bank B deposits in Bank A. Bank A makes loan and deposits, and it gets deposited in Bank B. So I worded that wrong. Bank A makes loan, and it's deposited in Bank B. Oops, I did word these all wrong. Bank B makes loan and gets deposited in Bank C. Bank C makes a loan and it gets deposited in Bank D. Bank D makes a loan and it gets deposited in Bank dash dash. After that, I didn't do any more of those A, B, C, Ds. So if I was going to fix this, this would be Bank A makes loan, deposited bank C. Whoops. Okay. This one would be bank C, makes loan, deposited, bank. Wait a minute. I think I've skipped one, didn't I? Okay, hang on. This one makes deposited in bank B. There we go. Bank B makes a loan. I'm making it more confusing, but I want to get it written out right. Deposited in bank C. Bank C makes loan, deposited in bank blah, blah, blah. Okay? Okay. So, bank A makes a loan, and I don't know where the D came from. Trying to go fast is what it is. When you're old and you try and type fast, you don't type well. Okay, bank A makes a loan and deposits it into bank B. Bank B makes a loan and it gets deposited in bank C. Bank C makes a loan and it gets deposited in bank D. Bank D makes a loan and the person that gets the loan deposits it in the next bank, okay? Okay, so how much can they loan? Well, the first one, bank A has $1,000 deposited, but they have to keep 10%. There's various ways it can be kept. It can be kept in their vault. It can be kept on deposit at the Fed. So you can deposit it at the Fed, and then you don't have to worry about someone stealing all the cash. There's a few other things they can do with it that are accepted as that are acceptable to be kept as reserves, but I'm not going to get into that for you. Okay. So basically, Bank A can loan out 900, and so they do, and the next bank gets 900, but they can't loan out 900. They can only loan out 900 minus 10% of 900. So 10% of 900 is 90, so 900 minus 90 is a 10. So they can loan that out. And then that gets deposited in another bank, and they can make a loan, but they can't loan out all of it. They have to keep back 10% of 810, which would be they have to keep back what, $81? So $81 subtracted from 810 is 729. So they can make that loan, then that next bank, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now this just keeps on going until you get all these banks making money because they started out with $1,000 new dollars, but banks made loans and it was deposited somewhere, and another bank said, we got a new deposit, we can make a loan. They make a loan, and it's a little bit smaller every time because each one has to keep 10% of deposits. So eventually, they're going to run out of money. It's going to get down to a penny or something, or to where you can't loan it out. So we have this rough approximation of what will happen if banks are freely making loans to acceptable clients, customers. There's an easier way. I mean, we will come up with the same answer if I take the sum of all these columns and find it. We'll get the same answer as if we actually took and did a formula here. Okay. But first of all, let's see, with a 10% reserve requirement, $1,000 will turn into $10,000 of new money. $1,000 will turn into $10,000 of new money. Okay? And basically, here's the formula I used for this this one right here. I don't know if you can see up here, but I just took line 6, so this is E6, this is the deposit amount. I took this amount and I divided it by the reserve requirement. So 1,000 divided by 0.1 gives you 10,000. And if I were to sum all these up, because I've done it before, but if I were to take the sum of the entire column of hundreds of lines of different amounts of loans, we would end up with $10,000, or we come out real close because you get to a point where they can't make a loan. So, you know, they make, you come out with 8 cents and they can't loan it. So it doesn't come out, it comes out like 9,992 or something. But, so this is a rough estimate, but it's really easy. And the multiplier is simply the sum of all the deposits divided by the original deposit. So 10,000 divided by 1,000 equals 10. But look what happens when the Federal Reserve changes that. Look what happens. Federal Reserve changes the reserve requirement. Let's say that they say, oh, this is what they did during the Great Depression. Federal Reserve was formed, the bill was 1913, and the Federal Reserve began to do their work in 1914. So they weren't very good at what they did at first because they'd never had to handle things. So when the banks started crashing in 1929 and we had this recession coming on, and you'll say, no, it was a depression, Dr. Sumner. It was because some things were done wrong by government. One thing that happened was the Smoot-Hawley tariff. We immediately said, we're going to have high tariffs on other countries' products so that we can keep Americans working. And all that resulted was 25 or 27, I think it was 25 countries retaliated, and so worldwide trade just shut down. You know, we weren't trading with them, they weren't trading with us, and it just shut down and made a worldwide depression. But another thing that happened is the Federal Reserve said, oh no, banks are failing. We need to make sure they're safer. So we need to make the reserve requirement higher. So let's just double the reserve requirement, shall we? So watch what happens to the sum of all deposits, and when I change this to 0.2. 0.2. We just cut the money supply in half. And remember, money is sort of like the lifeblood of the economy. You need enough blood to keep things moving. So we just cut the money in half by doubling the reserve requirement. So let's see. What if I cut it in half? What if, let's put this back at 0.1, and we're back at 10,000. Let's cut this to instead of 10%, let's cut this to 0.05, which would be half of that. That's 5%. Now we've doubled the amount of money. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, let me turn all this off, and I'll do some more filming later. I'll see you later.